Hello and welcome back. One of the very important topic in cloud computing is to provide the security for the data, for the applications, or for all the IT resources. Now, when we talk about the security of a cloud environment, it covers many different topics. So we can talk about, for example, encryption and decryption policies. We can talk about hashing algorithms. We can talk about even the physical security of a cloud data center. और जो आजकल हमारे पास AI का रोल है, so there is a huge role of AI in establishing the cloud security as well. Now, this is a vast topic, so we will not be able to cover all of these in one particular video. और इस वीडियो का पर्पस भी ये नहीं है कि हम इतना डेप्थ में इसको कवर करें. एक्चुअली व्हाट वी वांट टू डू, वी वांट टू बिल्ड द फाउंडेशन ऑफ द क्लाउड सिक्योरिटी प्रिंसिपल्स, ताकि एज ए स्टूडेंट आप बेसिक कंसेप्ट से फेमिलियराइज हो जाए, टर्मिनोलॉजीज आपको अवेयर हो जाए, एंड यू शुड गेट द आइडिया कि जब भी हम क्लाउड की सिक्योरिटी की बात करते हैं तो व्हाट डू वी टॉक अबाउट. सो लेट्स स्टार्ट दिस लेक्चर and let's discuss what does it mean actually by providing a cloud security. So generally when we talk about security in the cloud, we talk about two things, that is for example data in transit and data at rest. So let's take an example of uploading a file to a Google Drive. So while uploading, that is while you are using the internet, that is the data in transit, you want to secure your data. And once the data is uploaded to a cloud, that is data at rest, you also want to protect your data. And these two things cover our security principle. When we talk about the cloud security, it is both the security of data in transit and also the data at rest. Now, how do we do it actually? So first of all, जो सबसे पहला क्वेश्चन है वो है कि हाउ डू मैयर सिक्योरिटी. एज ए स्टूडेंट आप लोगों को ये पता होना चाहिए कि हम सिक्योरिटी को मैयर कैसे करते हैं, वो कौन से पैरामीटर्स हैं जिनके थ्रू हम कहते हैं कि हाँ ये मतलब सिक्योरिटी को हम मैयर कर रहे हैं. सो लेट्स टॉक अबाउट सम फंडामेंटल प्रॉपर्टीज. एंड एज ए स्टूडेंट, इफ यू हैव एवर स्टडी नेटवर्क सिक्योरिटी और इंफॉर्मेशन सिक्योरिटी सब्जेक्ट, you will be familiar with these terminologies, and they are actually the way we measure the security of data and applications as well. So let's talk about them one by one, and we cover the confidentiality first. So confidentiality is something which is to provide the access by only the authorized parties. So let's suppose there is a document and it's a confidential document. You don't want anyone else to get access to this document, and while you are sending this document to, for example, a service, uploading it or using a service, and in between there is a hacker and he reads this document. So that's the violation of the confidentiality, right? So आप चाहते हैं कि ये document in transit भी कोई इसको read ना कर सके, and once it is uploaded to a cloud, you also want that the data remains confidential as well. So if somebody intercepts it, the confidentiality is violated. Now, the second principle or the second property is the integrity. Now, integrity simply means that the data is not altered by unauthorized party, right? So it doesn't matter if it's confidential or not. What you want to know the tampering with your data. So let's suppose you are sending $100 and somebody changes it to, intercepts it and changes it to $1,000. Now, हमें पता है कि there is no importance of the zero, but in this particular context, it's very important, especially intercept it at the right time and add it at the right location. So, yes, if this happens, that means your data is tampered with, and integrity simply guarantees that there is no unauthorized change. So, if there is a change, we want to detect it. Now, the other two properties are authenticity and availability. Authenticity simply means that the data comes from a verified source, right? So you should be able to check the source कि वाकई मतलब verified source से डेटा है. If we are able to do it, that means that it is authentic. And availability is simply a principle in cloud or any other online data storage कि आपका डेटा जो सा है वो 24/7 क्या हो, accessible हो. And the reason we need it because the data is not with us anymore, it is on the servers, our third party. So availability becomes a very important principle, right? So these four properties, they form the security foundation of any cloud system. Now, once we cover that how do we provide security or how do we measure security, the next question is कि lack of security क्या है और हम उसको basically measure कैसे करेंगे. So yes, when the defenses fails, actually, right, three factors play their role, and these factors are threats, vulnerabilities, and a risk. So what is a threat actually? It's your potential violation. Okay? सो एनी पोटेंशियल वायलेशन, चाहे वो कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी की वायलेशन हो, इंटेग्रिटी की वायलेशन हो, अवेलेबिलिटी की वायलेशन हो, यूजिंग एनी टेक्निक, वी विल डिस्कस देम इन अनदर वीडियो. But yes, if there are threats or potential violation, we say that it is a threat. Now, how do we carry on threats? We use weaknesses in a particular system, and these are called vulnerabilities. And the probability of this threat, along with the impact, that how severely this is going to impact our cloud environment or our data, actually, that's the risk. So these three parameters, that is the threat, vulnerability, and risk, they measure the lack of security. So yes, if you want to know कि हमारे सिस्टम में जो है वो कितना lack of security है, we measure using these three things. Now, fine. So now we know that how to measure security and how to measure the lack of security. So the next question is कि हम security को enhance कैसे करें, हम उसको support कैसे करें, right? So the question, how do we actually protect our cloud environment? So we use three things, that is the policies, controls, and mechanism to support the security of a cloud environment, and they work together in a fashion that policies are the rules and regulations. ये हम high level की बात करते हैं कि basically rules क्या है, regulations क्या है, they are drafted by the organizations, right? So once we establish the policies, the next are to define the countermeasures, and these are called our controls. And these countermeasures must be implemented by specific mechanisms, and those are called our security mechanisms. So combining these three, they will help us in improving the security. So the policies actually establish the mechanisms, and those are implemented by the the policies establish the control mechanisms, and mechanisms are the actual tools which we use to implement these policies. Now, let's take an example here, the password. So the policy is to have a strong password, right? Must be 12 characters and capital and small in this. So that's a policy. Now, how do we actually apply the control mechanism? By product auditing or by access limitation by the technical persons. And the mechanisms, those are our actual algorithms. So for example, checking the capital letter and the small letter and so on. And these provides the ways to support the security. So now we know कि सिक्योरिटी के हमारे पास मेजर करने के क्या तरीके हैं, what are the parameters to measure the lack of security, and along with that, how do we increase or support the security. So let's talk about some other terminologies, and we start with the threat agent. So it is an entity, human भी हो सकता है, software भी हो सकता है, and that poses a threat by launching an attack. So what is an attack? So we look for a vulnerability, and if we find a vulnerability in the system, we will actually perform a threat. So the launching of this threat is called an attack. So these attacks can be internal or external, and they always use the vulnerabilities in our system. So The attackers can be of different types, and we start with the anonymous attacker. Anonymous attacker is actually a non-trusted, जिसको कोई permission नहीं है. It can be in external programs, and they can launch a network level attacks on a particular system. So let's suppose this is an attacker, and he is using some kind of public network to launch an attack on a cloud service. So let's suppose आप लोगों ने नाम सुना है port scanning. So we can scan ports. We can have a brute force login attack, and these are the anonymous attacker. Then the next one attack is the malicious service agent. We will go very quickly with these attacks types. So the service agent is actually a malicious entity who intercept and forwards the message. So they are actually doing the eavesdropping, right? They can eavesdrop, they can passively eavesdrop, or they can actually modify these messages. So if you are a consumer and you are using a cloud service, so the malicious agent is sitting in between, intercepting, eavesdropping the messages. Now, the next one is trusted attacker. So as the name suggests, basically, let's take an example where we say that we have two tenants, tenant A and tenant B, and both of them are using a cloud resource. Now, what we can do, we can have a cross-tenant attack. Now, here in this particular example, tenant A is an attacker and tenant B is simply a victim. He is a normal user, right? So, such kind of attack, it is by a trusted party, and that's called a trusted attack. Similarly, we can have a malicious insider. It's somebody within the cloud provider, and it's one of the very dangerous attack actually. And they can be employees, for example. They can steal the data. They can have a misconfigured security parameters, or they can actually plant backdoors into our cloud environment. Similarly, we can have eavesdropping. Eavesdropping can attack both the confidentiality and integrity. So if we are simply listening to the data, copying it, just looking for something important, then we are saying that it's attacking the confidentiality. But if we are going to change the data and send it forward, then we are attacking the integrity. So yes, as a consumer, and between the consumer and a cloud service, we can have a eavesdropping both as a passive and an active attack. We can have a malicious intermediary. It's simply somebody sitting in the middle. So if you are sitting in a public cafe, the owner can listen, can actually check the packets sending through the routers, and they can have a malicious intents as well. So they can change and alter the messages. So that's your malicious intermediary. Denial of service, we are already familiar. If you flood the server with too many requests, consume too much memory, or saturate the bandwidth, the server will not be able to actually fulfill the demand of legitimate users, and it will be unavailable for them. So such kind of an attack is called a denial of service attack. We can also have authentication and authorization attack. So let's suppose you are using a very weak password, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, something like that, and the attacker is able to guess that, and they can launch an attack using the weak authentication. So we should have some kind of policies for that to address such kind of an attack. So they can be have a potentially huge impact depending कि किस डेटा पे उनको एक्सेस मिल गया है. We can have virtualization attack, या हमारे पास जो ट्रस्टेड बाउंड्रीज हैं क्लाउड में वो ओवरलैप हो सकती हैं. सो लेट्स सपोज टॉक अबाउट दिस virtualization attack. So there can be flaws in our virtualization technology, and what can happen if we find a flaw, as you know, that the physical resource is shared by virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2, and what can happen that both this particular virtualization has a flaw, and using that flaw we can get access to this physical resource, right? So yes, these are some types of attacks which we just briefly discuss. In our next video हम इस बात को डिस्कस करेंगे how can we actually counter attack, countermeasure for we can have countermeasures for these different attacks. So thank you for watching, and see you in next video.